Good afternoon and welcome everyone. It is fantastic to see so many of you here already, and thank you. My name is Daniel Cairns and I'm the Head of Enrolments here at Fourth Rev, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you today to this masterclass. I'm going to get to our very special host and guest today shortly, and prior to that I'll give a very brief overview of the program, but more importantly, get to know her quickly. I'll be available at the end of the masterclass as well. But today is about that masterclass turning insights into impactful narratives with Tableau. And that is exactly what employers are seeking today. So the program in partnership with LSE is designed to deliver exactly that. It's designed in consultation with industry, and then has the academic underpinnings that you would expect from a world-class institute such as LSE. Very briefly, it's a 6-month online program designed to give you those practical skills to either commence your career in data, advance your existing career in data, or as so many of you may be looking to do, change your career into a data-focused role as well. Briefly, the program is made up of 3 courses and 1 live industry-facing project at the end. Data Analytics for Business being the first course, Data Analytics using Python being the second course, and Advanced Analytics for Organisational Impact. The last component of the program is a live industry-facing project, and I'll dive a lot deeper into that shortly after the masterclass that you're all here to attend as well. Just a little bit of housekeeping before I introduce Nora as well. If you have any questions either for Nora during the masterclass, please use the Q&A function. It's brilliant to see so many of you using the chat function to introduce yourselves, and please continue to do that. Or if you have any questions that you would like me to address following the masterclass, please pop them in the Q&A, and feel free to read through them and upvote different questions along the way as well. I look forward to seeing you in an hour's time once you've been taken through the masterclass with Nora and giving you a much more comprehensive overview of the program. Without further ado, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce and welcome Nora to host today's masterclass. Nora, welcome, thank you, and I'll hand over to you straight away. Looking forward to witnessing in the background as well. Thank you.
Thanks very much, DC. Hi, everyone, and thank you for that warm welcome. My name is Nora Wolf. I am one of the facilitators on the Data Analytics Career Accelerator with the London School of Economics and Fourth Rev that Daniel has mentioned. And today we're going to be looking at data storytelling using Tableau to unlock insights and tell a story about an exciting company that I'm almost certain all of you are very familiar with. Okay, I'm going to, without further ado, start off by just introducing the agenda for today. So I'm going to begin with a very brief introduction about myself and my career path to date. And then we are going to dive into a good story about the company Apple and look at what is data storytelling. With that, how can we create successful data stories, so the art of narration, and we'll then make a practical demonstration using a visualization tool called Tableau, where we will craft a data story, and once we have done that, we'll then address any questions that you might have posted in the Q&A chat, as DC has mentioned. Okay, so a little bit about myself. I have been in the data space for over 20 years now. I really enjoy engaging with students, with people, and discussing anything to do with data and analytics. One thing I'm not a big fan of is talking about myself, so I will keep this brief. I am a data specialist, with my background being computer science. So once I graduated, I moved into a development role and very quickly moved into what was then known as business intelligence. where we were about building reports and dashboards in an Oracle space. So how the world has changed into the tools that we use today. I then spent a number of years in data architecture, and then did an MBA where I moved into consulting with various industries, telcos, financial services, retail, etc., on crafting a data strategy and how to implement data strategies. And more recently, with a focus then on data analytics and the more cloud type environment. So how as I said, the technology changes over the time, the principles remain the same. So dealing with Python, Snowflake, you name it. And I just love data and playing with data to see what the data tells you as opposed to what you might think the scenario might be. Okay, so before we begin, I'd just like to start off this session with a quick poll. So just to ask all of you, of the companies that have been provided to you, who do you think the top tech company by market capitalization was in the year 2000? Okay, so we'll keep that poll open for a while. Please feel free to submit your responses. So let's dive into a good story, the story of the Apple turnaround from a struggling company, believe it or not, to what it is today, which is one of the largest, if not the largest, company by market capitalization. So looking at their story, so it was founded almost 50 years ago today, which is quite something, by Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak back in 1976, where they launched the Apple I personal computer. And very shortly after that, they then launched the Apple II. And by the 1980s, they then went public with their company. The early 80s was fairly shaky. So in 1983, they released the Apple Lisa, which was named after Jobs' daughter. And it was over budget and fell a bit flat. So by then, they also took on a different business-focused CEO. And shortly after that, released their Macintosh operating system, and Jobs resigned in 1985. So he left Apple and formed his own company to continue his vision, which he was just not getting the buy-in at Apple. And by the 1997, after many iterations of their Macintosh computers, Jobs or Apple was nearly bankrupt. So Microsoft happened to step in and invest in the company and buy the next company to bring on Steve Jobs and the other employees. So Steve Jobs rejoined the company and shortly thereafter took over as the interim CEO, to bring it back from the doldrums. Coming back to our poll and keeping it fairly brief. So who was the top tech company in the year 2000? And this was, in fact, Microsoft. So we will be bringing up the poll results, but it's not perhaps as one would have expected, even though it might have felt like yesterday for some of us. Looking at Microsoft's history, so founded at a similar time to the Apple company, so back in 1975, with the purpose of developing an interpreter for the Altair personal computer. So their focus was very much around software and not necessarily hardware. And in 1981, they then released their own operating system called MS-DOS that would run on IBM PCs. They then also went public in 1986, and they released the Windows operating system, which most of us, I'm sure, have become familiar with, where it was the first graphical user interface in order to use the computer. So they had a lot of success in the operating system and software space. And by 1990, they released the full Microsoft Office suite of Excel and Word, which really did accelerate their use and made their market share grow enormously. Okay, so with that brief story and looking at the poll that we ran, who was the top tech company in the year 2000? Many of you, 28% had said IBM, and you weren't far off. 23% said Apple, and Oracle had 3 votes. So yeah, so not a particularly big percentage there. And Microsoft, so 41% of you had it correct. Okay, so what lesson can we take away from here? You might think you know something, but instead of using your gut, rather check the data by backing that up with actual hard facts and data. Okay, so become data-driven, and that is what we are all about in the data analytics space. Okay, so with that story, let's just take a lovely quick visual of how the tech landscape has changed. So using a good bar chart, often the most effective type of visualization that you can use. And let's look at how the tech companies have changed from 1995 to 2019. Okay, so we can see in 1996, so just before Apple was bankrupt, it was tiny in comparison to the likes of Intel and Microsoft. And we can then watch the journey of how things changed. So by the 1995, the internet boom came about. Amazon became a significant entity with e-commerce, and Microsoft remained on top, and by quite a large margin. Apple, by 2005, the iPod had been released back in 2001, and it starts to grow. So just keep your eye on this company and Microsoft, and you can see how the landscape changes. So by 2010, they released the iPhone, and it just grew and dominated the market share. Okay, interesting story, and how we're looking at the change over time. So really it gives us a good sense of the scope of the size of the company by using a very simple bar chart. And we can see how the landscape continues to change. So with that being said, the moral of the story is that innovation is key to staying ahead. So without innovation, change is inevitable, and we need to innovate in order to avoid becoming irrelevant and falling off that top shelf completely. Okay, so one of an interesting quote, or a great quote, should I say, is fail fast, fail often, and fail forward. So continue to innovate, continue to try, and make sure then that you are prototyping, using data and gathering feedback as to whether or not your idea is working, and pivot or quit as soon as the data tells you so. So we are all intrinsically biased. We have certain ways that we see the world based on a number of factors, being our backgrounds, our education, what we've been exposed to, etc. So we want to try to limit this bias as much as possible. So by using data and being data-driven, we can then cross-check our assumptions against what the data is saying. Okay, so if you put yourself in the shoes of a Steve Jobs or a Bill Gates, where you know that you need to innovate, you need to change, how best can these leaders get the buy-in of their employers or stakeholders and shareholders into their vision? And the best way to do so is to be a good storyteller and to tell a good story. So if we look at why is storytelling a successful way to get the buy-in? So it builds familiarity and trust with your audience, and then create an environment that's conducive to learning. So it's easier to explain something when you tell a good story, as opposed to just laying out the facts without the context in the right way as well. And if we unpack what we mean by a good story in detail, so looking at the definition of a story. So a story can be fictitious. It can be about real events or people, but the purpose of it is told for entertainment. So we need to keep the listeners and stakeholders engaged. So keep it entertaining, captivate your audience so that they can then follow you on the journey to understand what it is that you want to convey to them. When it comes to data storytelling, so when dealing with data, we can be dealing with a lot of detail, a lot of numbers, etc., that can very quickly become overwhelming and boring. So keeping this in mind, data storytelling is the bridge between the data analysis, so all the work that's gone into understanding the data, and the decision-making process. So taking the key insights out of the data and proposing those actionable recommendations and suggestions as to what is the best decision to take without overloading the audience and losing them. So to put together then a good, successful data story, we need to make sure that upfront we clearly define what those objectives are. So we provide the background and context as well as what it is that we are setting out to achieve. We need to make sure that we keep the audience engaged at all times. So you want to keep them interested, provide them with the information that they are looking for, and convince them or provide them with enough information so that they know what it is that you are talking about is credible. So they can check whilst you are telling the story whether or not this is a feasible suggestion, or is there something that might have been missed? Within any data analysis project, we can't always have all the data at our fingertips. We often have to make assumptions. So with assumptions carries a certain amount of risk. So it's really important to put forward what assumptions were made and what risks and limitations had been found within the project. Your stakeholders can then decide whether or not this was in fact the best approach, or they can bring to light other reasons as to why your assumption might have been false, and rather you can go and revise it. So always raising these risks to engage with your audience and get that feedback. Most importantly is to focus on value. So we need to deliver value at every step of the way. So we wouldn't conduct any data analysis project or if it wasn't about creating value. Okay. So when it comes to actually then trying to craft your story so that you can keep your stakeholders engaged, remember to begin with the question or the problem statement. So start off with what it is that you are setting out to achieve. You can then lead the audience with those insights or key findings that have been uncovered with the data analysis. And then we conclude with actionable next steps or further questions that need to be addressed. So something that your audience can take away and implement. Really important is to know who your audience is. So what are their roles? What objectives do those particular stakeholders have? And make sure that you are addressing their needs. So if they need to know certain numbers to be able to go and give the thumbs up for an investment in a particular marketing campaign as an example, make sure that you are providing those important points up front so your audience is then engaged. You've got their attention and can then explain to them how you have arrived at those suggestions. We can use storytelling techniques like suspense or shock. So you might want to start by making quite a bold statement as to, I recommend from this analysis that you invest $10 million in this marketing campaign because. So straight away, your audience will want to know more, and you can then explain the detail around how it is that you've arrived at that number and why it is that you think this is the best next step to go. Okay, so using data visualization tools like Tableau, where we can take this detailed information, so it might be rows of text with lots of columns of data. So if you think of Microsoft Excel with a lot of information about it, if we use a chart or a graph to rather take that information, summarize it, and provide a picture of what the data looks like, it's far easier to spot a trend or an anomaly in the data. So a tool like Tableau is a self-service visualization tool where the user of the tool does not need to have a huge amount of technical expertise in order to work with the data. They can craft their own dashboards, and this is what we'll be doing today. So you can firsthand see how we can go about taking the detail and creating a story. Okay, so let's take an example. So the purpose of introducing and bringing you up to speed with Apple versus Microsoft, we'll use that example as our use case, and we are going to try to understand using data, how did Apple turn around in the early 2000s? Okay, so we're going to use Tableau to do so, excuse me. Okay, so first off, step one is we are going to define the problem and the purpose. So we want to know, how did the iPod, which was released in 2001, change Apple's success between the early 2000s, so between the year 2000 and 2010. Context is everything. So no matter what metrics or figures you are served, it's important to know how has this changed over time. So there's no point in taking a number at a specific point in time without understanding how it's changed to get there and what's happened afterwards. Has there been a trend that's been increasing or decreasing? What was the context over time? With that being said, we'll then look at the market capitalization and how this has changed over time. We also want to compare to other competitors. So in this example, we'll use the biggest player, and we know one of the biggest rivals of Apple. We'll look at Microsoft's performance over a similar period to see how this story has played out as well. Okay, so now that we've defined what it is that we're going to be looking at, the next step is always to source data. So we need to get data in order to build our story and assess how this has changed over time. So in this example, we used some web scraping off of some websites to get the market capitalization data for some of the top tech companies, the Apple, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, NVIDIA, which is a bit of a new kid on the big tech block, even though it has been around. We then also made use of Python, which is an excellent language, to pull the share price data of these companies from the year 2000. So using some of the pre-built Python libraries, and we then referenced Wikipedia to get those significant company milestones as well. Okay, so once we've got all this data, before we go to Tableau, we mock up what it is that we want to create. So on a piece of paper, before you touch any technology, first step, it's highly recommended, fail fast, fail early, is to draw a wireframe or a mock-up of what your dashboard needs to look at. You can then take this picture and test it against a number of the stakeholders to see, is this telling the story that they are expecting? Is there something confusing, etc.? So get some feedback early, and you can then pivot before you go and build. When you start building dashboards, you can spend a lot of time. So rather save the time upfront by planning and then using your wireframe as the blueprint for what it is that you're going to build. Okay, so once we've done this, we're going to create a market performance analysis dashboard of Apple. We're going to be looking at the market capitalization over time. We'll include the current market capitalization as well to give some context. We'll then be looking at the share price. So because the market capitalization is the value of the company, the share price contributes to this, but it does depend on how many shares are in circulation. So we'll look at the share price as well as the trading volume. So how many shares were traded, and that gives us a good indication of how much activity or how hot the stock is. We'll include some details as to what the key milestones were so that we can provide context as to at a specific point in time what happened, what products were released, what significant company events took place. Okay, so let's dive in then to Tableau. So first off, looking at the data files. So we have downloaded some and we put it into just a text-based format. So we call it comma separated. So it's just rows of data. This file is telling us the year, the value of the company, and the company code. And we can then look at the significant events. So again, the year, the company code, and what took place. And the share price data will give us specific dates. So from 2004, what the opening value was, the closing value, the adjusted closing value, etc., for a specific company. So to spot any trends or anomalies, looking at this type of data is impossible. Too much information, not easy to read, and you really would have to scrutinize every value. So using the likes of Tableau, I'm going to open up the tool. So it is a graphical visualization tool. We are going to load those files into Tableau. So I'm going to connect to the first file. So I'll open up a file. So I'm going to bring a text file, and I'll bring those significant milestones in first. Okay, by opening it up, we can then see what our data within this file looks like. And as you can see, it doesn't look good at all. And the reason is it's thinking that this text file, each of those properties are separated by space. So we'll just change this to a comma, and we now see these values. Okay, we are going to include the market capitalization file. So I'm going to drag that on, and we'll relate these two files to one another. So I'm going to just create a relationship, so a link between the two files. And I will link first off on the company, and I'm going to add the year as well. So this is part of your data preparation, where you need to first get a sense of what information is stored in these files and if there are any relationships. But on the accelerator, we do work through this, and and you become very, very familiar with it. So if it feels like I'm moving a bit fast, this is just for demonstration purposes. Momedi, would you like to, you have a question? Would you like to type it into the question and answers, and I will address it in the, I'll address it in the, after we've built the dashboard, if that's okay. Okay, so just type, if you don't mind typing your question, then we can then address this at the end of the demonstration. Okay, so I'm going to add then the share price data as well. So this is on a daily level. It's not a monthly, yearly level, should I say. So first off, I'm going to change how these fields are related, and I'm going to say at year, and I'm going to choose the date. But because this is a daily level, I can then add a calculation to make sure I extract just the year from this date. Okay, so now we've prepared our data. Let's go and build our dashboard. So coming back to our wireframe, first off, I'm going to create this market capitalization line chart. Okay. And let me slide back. All right, so in Tableau, we can create those different chart elements, and we'll then bring this together in a dashboard. So here are our files of data with the different fields that have been provided to us. So I want to bring back the year. I'm just going to bring that up. So the year, and I want to actually change this to be a dimension. So I don't want to sum that up. So if I bring the year back, and I'll remove that, and let's bring the company and the event. Okay, so we can see I've just been double clicking. So as you can see, there's been no coding required. I am going to, however, rearrange this information so that I get it into just a list of information that I want to see. So we want to see the significant event as text, and I want to bring this year down onto the row. Okay, so if we expand this, we can see 1975, Microsoft was founded, etc. I want to exclude all these null values where there was not a significant event. So I can filter this detail by dragging the significant event into the filtered section and excluding where there aren't any values. Okay, I'll call this sheet milestones. Okay, so coming back to that wireframe, I, in fact, have created the detail that I'm going to use at the bottom of the worksheet. Okay, then next up, we are going to go back to Tableau, and I am going to create that market capitalization line chart. So on a new chart element, I'm going to bring in the year from market capitalization. I'll bring in, I'm actually going to use this thing. Let me change this so that when I filter the dashboard, they are related. Okay, so I'm going to bring in the company and the market value. Okay, let me bring in this year actually and just change this element. Bring back this value. Okay, so we can now see the market capitalization by the different companies. So instead of looking at that detail, we can see how for each of these companies it has grown. But as you might assume, it's not particularly easy to read. So let's then change this to look like a line chart. So if I just select what chart type I want to see, I can then be served on the same range, these different line trend lines showing how this has changed over time. So we can see how Apple has grown, whereas in the year 2000, 2001, it was far less than Microsoft. Okay, so we have one chart element. What would be useful is to know what were those milestones on these graphs as well. So if we then bring in the significant event on the tooltip, when I hover over it, you can see that Xbox 360 was released in 2005. So we can start bringing in more context. The iPhone and Apple TV was released in 2007. Okay, there's a null value, so let's exclude those nulls so that we don't clutter up our chart. So as you can see, it's very simple to work with this data. If we want to say, right, we are looking at the iPod, let's see how that how that looks in terms of our chart. So I do want to change this year. I'm going to use this year instead. I'm going to remove this year. So let's just see what that looks like. And I see this year must be a continuous. Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to make that a continuous measure. And in the year 2001 for Apple, the iPod was launched. We can add a little annotation to just bring this to your audience's attention. So I'm going to type the iPod on this data point, and we can then see that's when the iPod took place. The iPod release took place. If we want to look at when was the iPhone launched, so the smart device digital hub revolution, which not only innovated Apple's products and created a different way of how we did things, it also then allowed Apple to sell different products around just these devices. Apple and where we sit now with streaming and digital content creation as well. Okay, so let's then look at the App Store release, and we'll just bring this to our attention. App Store. So there's when the App Store is released. And sadly, Steve Jobs died in 2011. So this being that he was such a good force at Apple, we would expect this would have affected how the company performed. But alas, it kept on growing, which shows what a good leader he was. And let's then see what else. In 2010, the iPad was released as well. Okay, so we're just providing some context for our audience so that visually they can see what happened at certain points in time. So what important points is it that we want to bring to their attention? Okay, so we now have a lovely little story where we can see what important points we want to bring to our attention. So as you'll note, the chart title is fairly meaningless. It's a sheet, so we want to always use good titles so that whoever's using this dashboard knows exactly what it is that they're looking at and what they should be focusing on as well. So this is then Market Cap. It's picking up the name of the sheet as the title. Okay, so a few questions and answers. So just to address them while we are busy building our dashboard. So to practice and master the skills, Tableau does have a free trial period. So you can download the desktop version and also play with your data and also and try this at home. And you will have a month to work with that. So that's a good way to do it. And yeah, Maka, in terms of the iPod being the only change, certainly wasn't, but it was a good innovation within Apple that led to the evolution of the iPhone and the App Store and iCloud. So we wanted more and more content. So what do? We can't store it on these devices, we store it in the cloud and pay Apple for a subscription. Okay, so we've got the market capitalization. We need to look at the current market capitalization as well. So let's create a simple one, and I'm just going to accelerate the demo here so that we can get to the end results sooner. Okay, so first off, let's look at the year. We will make this a discrete measure and filter it for the year 2023. And we want to bring in the company and bring in the value. So it automatically sums the data for us. We want to change this to be, we'll use a bar chart because it is effective to see how these values compare to one another. So we don't have to try to work it out. We can see the scale of how they differ. Importantly as well, when it comes to the types of colors, etc., that you use, it is important because if we look at this chart as it is, we are seeing all blue. So blue could represent the market capitalization, but because all of the companies are different, we want to signal this to whoever it is that's reading or using the dashboard, and we want to make use of color. So by making use of color, and we'll drag the company there, you can see that these are different companies that we are looking at. We can also sort the data from top to bottom so that, again, just glancing at this chart, we can automatically see Apple's number one, it's at the top, and Microsoft is second. So you don't, if we were to turn this off and it is doing this for us automatically, you don't want your audience to ever have to try and work it out. You're trying to provide it to them in the way that you can automatically interpret it. Okay, so let's say this is the 2023 market cap. Okay, next up, let's create the share price data. So we'll use the year, we'll use the opening price, and like a bank account or bank balance, not all measures should be summarized, like the opening share price on a daily level. I think Apple or Microsoft wish that they could sum their share price every day. So what we can do instead is use an average. So what was the average opening price for the company? So we'll bring in the company code, and we want to see it then over time. So let's try and change this one then to a continuous variable so that we can then see the line chart over time. And we can see then how the share price has changed over time. Okay, again, I'm going to make it share price, and let's then do the same for shares, for the volume of shares traded. Okay, so if I bring in the year, the company code and the volume, I'm going to change that to continuous, make that a share price there. There's the volume, and we'll call this trading volume. Okay, so we've got our chart elements. In isolation, it's interesting, but it doesn't tell a great story. So we want to use all of these together so that we can see how the different milestones had an impact on the share price, etc. So we can make use of a dashboard to bring all of these elements together. So I'm going to create a new dashboard. I'm going to show the dashboard title. According to my plan, I was going to call it the Apple Market Performance Analysis Dashboard. So let's do that. Apple Market Performance Analysis. And then we're going to add these elements to our dashboard. So I'm going to create some sections. So it's important to align your different elements so that it looks neat and it doesn't look all over the show and just not welcoming. Okay, so I'm going to, by dragging on that market capitalization chart that we had already created, I can then include the market capitalization next to it. Okay, so we can get this information next to each other. I'm then going to add another little vertical piece where I'm going to add 2 more charts, the share price element and the trading volume next to that. Okay, I'm then going to add another vertical section, and we're going to drag these milestones. Okay, so we can then see how did these different events, and you can just fiddle with the annotations as well to make them more readable when it appears on a dashboard by moving them. Okay, so this is more of an explanatory data analysis. So we're trying to explain something, and this is why we have annotated certain events. If it was more exploratory and it's something that you just want to get a sense of what is going on, you wouldn't necessarily want to hard code certain elements there as well. Okay, so we can see this has been duplicated, so let's remove that from the dashboard. And we want to add a filter. So let's add this date filter then to the dashboard. And it was discrete, so I actually want to change, and I have been toggling between whether I want to make these discrete or continuous, but we're going to set that to a range of values, and we can then apply this on our dashboard as well. So on this market capitalization, I can go to that filter and add it to the dashboard. So we can then dynamically update the chart. So you can see it's updating just this chart element, which is useful, but we would like it to be applied to all of these different charts. So I go to the filter and I say apply to worksheets, and I'm going to choose everything except for the 2023 market cap. Okay, so now we can interrogate this data over whatever time period we want to look at. Okay, so as you can see, when looking at what made Apple grow as it did do, we can assess the story pre 2000 as in terms of the different changes at the company, and when Microsoft started to have a lot of monopoly or antitrust lawsuits launched on them. If we look at the market capitalization between the year 2001 and 2012, we can see that Microsoft was a lot bigger than what Apple was. When Apple launched the iPod, this started to change, and Microsoft's market capitalization started to decline. So their strategy had been to focus on their different operating systems and software. However, with the innovation of these smart devices and the ability to cross-sell all these various products, they then entered into the Windows Phone or mobile operating system space and also created a retail store, which was not a success. So from their share price side of things, they started to lose value. However, with their new CEO that came in 2000 and I think it was 2007, where Steve Ballmer stepped down, they then went into the cloud services space as well, which has been a really good move for them. And they could then, with Microsoft Azure and other services, start to gain market share again, so start to grow. Interestingly, now in the year 2020, Microsoft has partnered and invested heavily into OpenAI's ChatGPT. So watch this space in terms of innovation. Once again, you got to innovate in order to remain ahead. And we can see then how this is starting to play out for Microsoft and where it's going to lead to there. Okay. So looking at the questions and answers then, Zishan, so there are, in terms of working with Tableau and mastering Tableau, so it has a great community where you can go onto their blogs and look at how different dashboards, different elements have been created and really customize components. So certainly you can use and push the tool to many different levels. And we do spend 3 weeks working with Tableau, so where you will be playing with the tool, using the tool, and getting to know the tool well. So yeah, so please download a trial and give it a try. In terms of the course itself, I'm now going to hand over to DC to discuss the how you go about signing up for the course and costs, etc. Okay, thanks everyone. Thank you for your time, and I hope you learned something new.
Well done, Nora. Thank you. More importantly, did you enjoy that also?
I said, DC, I love talking data, so I can talk data to the nth degree. So yes, absolutely.
Thank you all. Congratulations on taking the a step towards making a decision, an investment in yourself. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Nora, also for today. That recording will be available shortly. We look forward to witnessing your career success. Thanks, Nora.
Thanks, everyone, and good luck, guys. I can also vouch for it. It is a great course, and you learn a lot of skills. I've just scratched the surface today. But thank you for your time and for joining us. Have a
Cheerio,
great day.
all. Have a great day.